All the evidence against me was created by my boss. That morning, Seattle was covered in a light mist, the air tinged with the scent of metal and the hot coffee still in my hand. I was sitting in my old Ford, last week's playlist still playing, when a message came through. Meeting room, 21st floor. Now, no question mark, no greeting, just an order. My name is Daniel Tran, head of strategic analysis at Turing Insight. In the past 6 years, I have never missed a meeting, never been late on a deadline, never submitted a bad report. I'm the kind of employee the CEO could proudly present to the board, or use as an example during quarterly reviews. The meeting room on the 21st floor was as quiet as an interrogation chamber. David, the CEO, was sitting at the head of the table, his face expressionless. To his right was Ellie from legal, and a man I didn't recognize, in a white shirt, with a look that said he already knew I was guilty. David spoke immediately, without pause. The internal financial report has been leaked. Only 5 people had access, and you're the only one not on the executive team. I stared at David without blinking, my mind racing through possibilities. System error, identity theft, an internal setup, but he didn't wait for an explanation. This isn't a criminal investigation, but the shareholders want a name, and I need your cooperation. I try to keep my voice steady. I didn't do it. You know that. David didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, as if observing an object he once valued, but could no longer use. No one defended me. Not a word from Ellie, who had worked with me on the most sensitive projects. The one who once said, "Daniel, I trust you more than anyone here." Now she bowed her head, silent, as if her silence could save her job. They didn't fire me on the spot. They asked me to voluntarily resign to protect the company's reputation. A non-disclosure agreement was already prepared. The severance wasn't bad, but the feeling of being sacrificed couldn't be measured in numbers. I walked out of the meeting room, past eyes pretending to be busy, ears straining for gossip. Rumors spread faster than leaked documents. I knew I had no place here anymore, even if no one had officially terminated me. Back home, I sat alone in my small Capitol Hill apartment. No lights, no laptop. I just sat, breathed, and wondered, what did I do wrong? Work too hard? Trust the boss too much? Or was I just too naive to realize I'd been positioned as the fall guy? 3 hours later, I opened my laptop, logged back into the system, all access revoked. But I had a habit of saving old drafts to a private drive. Forecasts, test models, misdirected emails. Among them, there was a presentation that had never been made public, titled, Potential Strategic Partnership with Alpha Grid, Internal Draft. Alpha Grid is an AI conglomerate from China, previously accused of industrial espionage in Europe. The presentation was sent from David's account, but the timestamp matched the time he was attending a conference in Singapore. I remember clearly, because I wrote his speech for that trip. I started to question things, not who leaked the report, but why I had access to that draft in the first place. Why would David, someone so secretive and controlling of information, send something that's sensitive to me? Then I realized I wasn't trusted. I was chosen, so that if everything blew up, there'd be someone with a Vietnamese name, a background that wouldn't raise flags, and just enough access to take the fall. That night, I drove out to Alki Beach, sat and stared at the pitch-black water. No stars, no moon. I felt like I was looking at my own career, swallowed by something far beyond my control. I used to think companies were where the competent were recognized, but now I know they're also where the loyal get devoured if they stand on the wrong square of the chessboard. And me, with nothing left to lose, began to wonder, if I'm no longer a pawn, what else could I become? I used to believe that loyalty was something that couldn't be commercialized, that if I were good enough, kind enough, and always worked for the common good, the system would protect me. That belief now lies in ruins somewhere on the floor, among the shattered fragments of the career and reputation I once guarded like a treasure. 3 days after that meeting, I sat motionless in my dark apartment, with only the hum of the refrigerator reminding me that time was still moving forward. Even if I wasn't. I had showered, I had eaten, but everything was mechanical. My body functioned, but my mind kept looping a sequence of images. David's eyes when he said, "I need you to cooperate," the non-disclosure agreement. Ellie's gaze, avoiding mine like I was already dead. I opened my laptop and started going through old files, forecasts I once made, presentations I had poured myself into. I wasn't looking for clues. I was trying to prove to myself that I had once mattered, that the past years weren't an illusion, that I hadn't been discarded just for being invisible. But when I looked at the draft titled Alpha Grid, Internal Pre-Acquisition Notes, something began to stir inside me. That file had never been published. It was sent from David's account, but at a time when he was overseas on business. And I, someone outside the executive team, was the only one who received it. I used to think it was a mistake. Now I know it was intentional. David wanted me to know, wanted me involved, wanted someone to take the fall if things blew up. I wasn't just a victim. I was an essential piece in his game. The feeling of betrayal didn't come like a slap. It seeped in slowly, like poison. With every passing hour, I saw more clearly how I'd been used. Those moments when David pulled me out of meetings to talk privately, the compliments in front of others, the pats on the back like I was a star pupil, all just part of the setup for that day. I spent a sleepless night piecing together fragments of memory, and by the next morning, when the first light came through the window, I knew I wouldn't accept this as the ending. I had no power, no shares, but I had memory, data, and a copy of an old hard drive saved the night I was summoned. I started organizing emails, cross-referencing timestamps, extracting metadata. An email from David to AlphaGrid CEO, encrypted as a fake attachment. A string of deleted internal Slack messages, which I had screenshotted because they fell off. The pieces started forming a picture. Turing wasn't just merging. They were negotiating the sale of the entire AI system to AlphaGrid through a secret handover deal bypassing the board. A deal involving tax evasion, antitrust violations, and most importantly, requiring a scapegoat if discovered. I began collecting everything, but I didn't go to the press. I needed someone who understood the dark side of tech, and who had a personal reason to expose David. I remember a name, Miranda Lee, a former CTO of a company AlphaGrid had acquired and forced out. She once said, "I don't stay silent to survive. I speak up so I don't die twice." I sent her an anonymous email, attached a few preliminary pieces of evidence, and wrote, "If you've ever wanted a shot at flipping the board, I've got the cards." 3 days later, I received a single message. "Meet me at 2 a.m. Basement parking, Lennox Hotel. Come alone." I went. She was standing by a license plate-less electric car, wearing a hooded black coat. Her eyes were sharp as blades, but not angry, just the clarity of someone long familiar with betrayal. "You're not as naive as I thought," she said, eyes fixed on mine. "But I need to know, are you doing this for conscience or revenge?" I answered after a moment of silence. "Both. But if I had to choose, I just want to live with the truth." She nodded. "Then let's begin." Miranda and I didn't go to the media. We sent the files to a major shareholder who had long been suspicious of David, William Grant, a seasoned investor with a personal grudge that had never quite faded. William didn't need a reason to hate David. He just needed proof to act. Everything happened quietly. An internal audit was launched. A string of emails recovered. An emergency board meeting was called. David was summoned without knowing what awaited him. I didn't show up. I didn't need to. When he walked into that meeting, everything he had once used to accuse me had turned against him. And this time, no one needed me to cooperate. Miranda called me after it was over. Her voice was deep but lighter than ever. "You weren't a pawn. You were the only one who saw the board from the start." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Not out of victory, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't return to Turing. I had no desire to rebuild in a place that tried to kill me with silence. But I kept one thing, clarity, a new kind of faith. That sometimes, betrayal is the only way to truly see the limits of loyalty. And one simple truth, the strongest person isn't the one with power. It's the one who still holds onto the truth after everyone else has sold it. But it didn't end there. David wasn't thrown out like a helpless man. A week later, he hired a private attorney and sued the company, alleging entrapment and internal data leaks. The investigation shifted. William stepped back to avoid conflict of interest allegations. Miranda vanished off the radar, and I, once hidden in the shadows, was pulled into the light again. One morning, I woke up to an email from a news outlet. An article had been prepared, naming me as a disgruntled former employee with a personal vendetta. I knew this was a counterattack, but this time I didn't stay silent. I went live, publishing all the encrypted evidence from the beginning, publicly, on no one's behalf, defending no one, just raw, difficult truth. Over 30,000 views in 6 hours. I got a court warning, but I also received messages from other former employees, people David had once sidelined. They wanted to stand with me. I wasn't alone anymore. The battle didn't end with a nod in a private boardroom. It spilled into the streets, on his social media, into the whispered stories on the sidelines of tech conferences. I wasn't the same person anymore, but I had chosen not to look away. I knew clearly, from the moment I made the data public, that all the arrows would be pointed at me. They would call me a saboteur, a bitter ex-employee, an ungrateful person. But I was prepared. I bought a burner SIM card used only to receive whistleblowing information. I created anonymous accounts to store copies of all related documents. And I recorded the entire journey. Not to post, but in case someone someday tries to rewrite the truth. The wave of public opinion didn't come like a storm, but as undercurrents gradually breaking over time. A former HR staff member sent me a recording of David ordering layoffs without prior notice. A former engineer said he saw David approve a contract with AlphaGrid last year, but was forced to sign an NDA. The evidence came in drips, but when pieced together, formed an undeniable structure. And I was the one holding the final key. Inside Turing, divisions began to surface. One group of employees demanded an independent investigation. Another group turned their backs, saying I was destroying the company's image, the same one I once helped build. I don't blame them. I used to be like that, believing that staying silent meant preserving stability. But stability built on lies can never last. One night, I received a strange call. The man's voice on the line was hoarse and rushed. "Stop. You don't understand who's backing David. This is bigger than a buyout." I asked for his identity, but he hung up. At 3 a.m, I stood in the kitchen, phone clenched in my hand, with only one question in my mind. What exactly am I getting myself into? I began to be followed. Someone tampered with my mailbox. There were strange footprints in the hallway outside my apartment. Once, I found my car had been unlocked when I left the supermarket, even though I was sure I had locked it remotely. The fear wasn't of being caught, but of being erased in silence. But I couldn't stop. I contacted an independent journalist, not to publish the story, but to pass on the final copy of the data, in case I disappeared. He didn't ask for my identity. He only said one thing. "You've got more guts than most people I've met." I laughed, not because I felt brave, but because when you have nothing left to lose, there's nothing left to fear. The struggle isn't glamorous. There are no podiums, no laurel wreaths, only sleepless nights, anonymous emails, and strange looks behind your back. But I see one thing clearly. Every time someone speaks up, the darkness recedes a little. And I know, no matter the outcome, I have stepped out of silence. I no longer record everything on the same hard drive. After being tracked, I began to split all the data, encrypt it, and hide it across different cloud servers, each one holding a fragment, none sufficient to understand the whole picture unless reassembled. I learned to use anonymous tools, virtual networks, and even communicated through burner devices, as if I were an undercover operative, not just someone who used to analyze market share. No one prepared me for this life, and maybe no one had the time to explain the rules it runs on. After the last message from Miranda, I received no further information. She disappeared from the radar, all social media accounts shut down, and the anonymous emails I received no longer seemed to come from the same source. But I knew she was still alive. The way she warned me, cold but precise, wasn't a goodbye. It was an ellipsis. I decided to return to Turing, not to apologize, not to demand justice. I want to look at the place that once built up and tore down my reputation. I wanted to see what remained after the curtain fell. The office was quieter now. Few of the old faces remained. They had changed the logo, the slogan, even the website, as if trying to erase all old memories. I didn't go inside, just stood in the lobby, looking at my reflection in the glass. A young employee walked out, hesitated when he saw me. I nodded. He didn't know who I was. He didn't need to. I left, but I didn't go home. I took a cab to an old cafe in Queen, and a place where Ellie and I used to meet back when we trusted each other. She hadn't contacted me since the fateful meeting. But surprisingly, as I sat there, a woman wearing sunglasses walked up and sat across from me. Ellie. She looked older, her hair shorter, nothing like the confident lawyer she once was. She didn't greet me. She just placed a USB on the table. They've been watching me for months. I kept this because I thought I needed to stay safe. But I was wrong. You were right, Daniel. You're the only one who didn't change your tone when the wind shifted. I took the USB, didn't say thank you. Not because I was ungrateful, but because thank you wasn't enough. The USB contained audio recordings and signed contract drafts, private meeting schedules between David and executives from AlphaGrid, all encrypted under harmless file names. One recording stood out, a conversation between David and someone named Reiner, the head of an investment fund manipulating numerous tech companies in the U.S. They discussed placing people inside the Department of Commerce, influencing AI import policy, and using Turing as a testing ground. I was no longer the only one sacrificed. The entire company was a pawn. I sent copies of the data to an anonymous group of analysts specializing in uncovering investment manipulation. They didn't publish it immediately. They built a financial map, tracing each money trail, each shell company, every hidden stakeholder. 6 weeks later, they sent back a nearly 400-page report titled, "The Manipulated AI Ecosystem in North America." The Turing case is just the tip of the iceberg. The report was leaked, not by me, not through the media, but by an environmental hacker group. Ones who had once been sued by Turing for revealing their AI was being used to optimize deforestation. The network began to spread. AlphaGrid denied everything. Reiner vanished from the U.S. David was investigated again, this time by the Federal Trade Commission. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, because the price was hundreds of people dragged into something they never understood, never knowing they were pieces on a board far bigger than they imagined. One night, I received a handwritten letter, a rarity in this era, with no return address. Inside was a single sentence, written in fountain pen. The truth saves no one, but wakes people up. I kept the letter close to my chest, as a reminder. No one in this story won, but some of us, like me, woke up in time before being consumed. I left Seattle 2 months later, told no one, left no trace. I became an independent consultant for small startups in Austin, helping them avoid the mistakes I had witnessed. I no longer appeared in public. I declined all interviews, every podcast. I didn't need to retell it. The story had told itself. One day, I heard that Miranda was seen in Berlin at an anonymous tech conference. No photos were taken, no identity confirmed, but among the speakers was an unfamiliar name, Emel, and the talk was titled, "When Silence Isn't Peace." I smiled. Maybe for the first time, I felt at peace, not because justice had arrived, but because the truth was no longer hidden. And I, once a pawn, had stepped off the board, carrying a piece of memory no one dared to keep, yet the only part no one could bend. But it didn't stop there. A month later, I received an envelope with no name, containing a copy of a military-grade AI data transfer contract between a shell company in Switzerland and a foreign economic espionage unit. What was terrifying was the final signer, AlphaGrid. The last line of the document, based on core technology developed by Turing Insight, made my blood run cold. I brought the document to a former national cybersecurity officer, now working anonymously with a group of ethical engineers. After scanning through it, he simply said, "You thought you escaped, but you've only touched the outer layer." From there, everything spiraled out of my control. Parties I had never heard of began approaching me. A stranger waited in the basement, saying only, "Stay silent if you want to stay peaceful." I was no longer sure what was true. Had I touched a network that no one could touch and survive? Or had I become a piece in a game much larger than I thought I was disrupting? Sometimes I wondered, did Miranda really disappear? Or did she just switch roles? And Ellie, why give me the USB just as I was about to give up? This story doesn't end. There is no final blow. No one was immediately arrested. And maybe no one will be. But I, a nearly anonymous person, left a scratch on a massive machine of power. It may be erased. It may be replaced. But it existed. And perhaps that's all I needed. But just as I thought I had all quieted down, a package arrived at the virtual office address I used to receive mail. Inside was an SSD, unmarked except for a small handwritten note. "If you've started, then finish." The drive contained hundreds of gigabytes of encrypted data. It took me over a week to break the first layer, which held internal financial reports, payrolls, contracts tied to at least 6 fake companies, some based in Cyprus, others in jurisdictions beyond U.S. legal reach. My name appeared in them, but not as a whistleblower. As a collaborator, I was inserted into fake payments, contracts with scanned signatures. It was all reconstructed to make it look like I had been paid to leak internal touring information. Part of a money laundering scheme, part of a simulation so intricately designed that if leaked, no one would know what was real and what was fabricated. I understood immediately. This was the final counterattack. No need for assassination. No threats. Just noise, and the world would turn away on its own. When the truth is polluted long enough, it becomes the most suspicious thing of all. I faced 2 choices: keep fighting and sink into an endless legal swamp, or walk away, hold on to the piece of truth I still had, and vanish for good. That night, I went to the old harbor on the city's south side, once a shipping company's warehouse, now abandoned. I brought the hard drive, printed backup documents, and a can of gasoline. I had backed up a copy elsewhere, but this original, I couldn't let it exist. I burned everything. The flames rose silently. No heroic symbol, no grand statement. Just a man, watching what was once his whole life turn to ash, and then walking away with nothing. I boarded a flight the next morning to a non-extradition country. No one knows where I am. I live on cash, do freelance work under a new name. Sometimes I hear news of AlphaGrid, now rebranded, expanded into healthcare. Reiner hasn't reappeared. David was released after a failed hearing. Ellie now works for a nonprofit. Miranda, still no trace. This story, if told, won't resemble what I once imagined. The truth, once exposed, doesn't liberate anyone. It only pulls us out of comforting illusions. I didn't win. I'm not happy, but I'm still alive. And every time I look in the mirror, I know I'm no longer a pawn, not a piece. I'm the hand that once trembled, but had the courage to smash the board, if only once in the dark. Thank you for listening until the end of the story. This is not an easy story to take in. It doesn't bring a sense of lightness or a fulfilling ending like many other stories. No villain gets caught immediately, and no clear justice is served. But that's exactly why it feels more real, closer to reality. Daniel's story is not simply a journey of someone betrayed by colleagues, the system, or misplaced trust. It is an awakening journey of a person who once believed that doing the right thing would always protect him, that loyalty would always be appreciated. Every detail in the story is a slice of the modern world, where technology is not just a tool, but a weapon, where data can build or destroy an entire person, where the truth no longer lies in the hands of the righteous, but in the hands of those who control the information. Daniel is no longer just a market analyst. He has become a living witness in the power games between corporations and governments. And the important thing is, he didn't choose to enter that game, but he also didn't choose to stay silent when he realized he was being turned into a pawn. The greatest meaning of this story lies in the fact that it doesn't try to paint hope. It simply says that even if you don't win, you can still survive with the truth. No one needs you to be a hero, but if you can stay clear-headed, you haven't been completely swallowed. If you followed the story to this point, I'm truly grateful. Not everyone takes the time to listen to a story heavy with darkness, filled with doubt and unnameable silences. But if somewhere in what Daniel went through, you've seen yourself, ever questioned why you were treated unfairly, ever been cast in a role you didn't choose, then you are not alone. Maybe this is your story too, just told under a different name. If you find this story meaningful, I hope you'll continue to follow this channel. What I want to do here is not to tell stories for entertainment, but to tell them to open new perspectives, so that someone out there, feeling lost, will know their loneliness isn't the only one, and their silence, sometimes, also carries a powerful voice. Thank you for listening. See you again in the next stories.